Cave Dive! Cave Dive! Thanks for stopping by, my anime and manga nerds. Welcome to Calvary's Cave, and it is time to take a cave dive into the Fate series. More specifically, we are looking at Fate Zero. And I know there's a ton of arguments online about which show I should be watching first, so I chose the option that made the most sense for me, and that was chronological. And if you have a problem with that, too bad, I already watched it. Now, before we begin, I do want to make a quick apology. I had to watch this show 3 times just so I could get a grasp of what I was watching. In my opinion, this is definitely not a starter anime. But once I locked in and figured out what the show was trying to tell me, I discovered peak. I'm just gonna say it outright. Fate Zero is an outstanding show. It's one of those rare shows that nails almost everything that it's trying to do. First off, the characters are fantastic. Every single one of them feels layered and human. You've got heroes who are deeply flawed, anti-heroes with compelling motivations, and even the villains make you understand where they're coming from. You genuinely care about what happens to them. And I'm not talking about Castor, relax. But that being said, his logic is so twisted that I can actually see how he reached those conclusions. And then there are the twists. They're sharp, surprising, and brilliantly executed. Just when you think that you have the story figured out, it pulls the rug out from under you in the most satisfying way. The ideals and philosophies at play are really what elevate it. You get these intense clashes between different beliefs and makes you think longer after the episode ends. And the power system is incredibly smart and creative. It's not just about big flashy attacks, it's strategic, tactical, and deeply tied to the characters' personalities and backstories. And the action scenes, they are so intense. They're beautifully choreographed and packed with tension. Every fight feels meaningful and has real stakes, especially the first clash between Saber and Lancer. Overall, Fate Zero delivers on every level. Strong writing, complex characters, clever magic, and gripping battles. If you are looking for a dark, mature, and thought-provoking anime, this one is a clear standout. That being said, there are some caveats, and I just want to get them out of the way at the beginning. Now, like I mentioned, it did take me 3 separate tries to get into the anime, and I think it might have been due to the first episode. And holy exposition dump, Batman! I had to time it just to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. That opening is straight up information overload on steroids. In the first 8 minutes, they hit you with Kiritsugu, Iris Veil, and the Ainsburns and their daughter, the entire Holy Grail War setup, Kirei, Tosaka, Command Seals, where the Grail's gonna pop off, the plot to team up with Kirei, the Mato Association, what the Grail even does, and the 8th Sacrament Assembly, the Masters, and the 7 Servants, and that's not even everything that they were spitting out. It's like they took the entire lore and yeeted it at your face at 3x speed. I felt like I needed a PhD in Fate lore just to keep up with the show. Like I said, it took me a full 3 rewatches just for everything to finally click with me. I just wish they could have eased us into the story a little bit smoother instead of trying to any percent speedrun the rulebook. Now I get it, there are shows before this one, but watching it chronologically is the best way to consume, in my opinion. Story-wise, I would play Red Dead 2 before RDR 1 for good reason. I shouldn't be penalized for wanting to start everything with no history of what's going on. But on the other hand, it could just be because I have small brain. But after I locked in, this show is actually goated. That being said, I know Saber is right there on the cover like she's the star of the show, but I genuinely can't decide who I'm supposed to be rooting for. Almost every character has such a compelling ideal or dream they're fighting for that it makes picking a side surprisingly difficult. Tosaka and Kirei carry a lot of the lore, and the sharp back and forth between Gilgamesh and Kirei creates some of the best character moments in the series. Still, there are times I find myself caring more about the servants than their masters. And even though Kariya barely appears in season 1, I really don't want him to lose. I am already hoping that he wins just so he can save Sakura. But the problem is, if one person wins, it basically means destruction or heartbreak for everyone else. And that leaves me stuck wondering what would happen to Iskander's grand dream if Kariya actually pulled it off. I've only watched season 1 so far, so I don't really know how it ends, but I still can't settle on a favorite. It's genuinely rare for a show to make you care about this many people at once, and I really like that about Fate Zero. Another thing that really stands out for me is how strong the ideals are in the show. They are absolute peak, and they give so much weight to each character. You've got Iskander with his massive desire for reincarnation. As the king of conquerors, he doesn't just want to win the Grail, he wants another shot at a full life so he can conquer, explore, and experience the world on an even grander scale. And his master, Waver, starts out as this insecure, overlooked mage, desperate to prove himself, but Iskander's sheer charisma and ambition slowly reshape him into someone bolder, and their bond becomes one of the most inspiring master-servant relationships in the entire war. And then there's Kide, quietly desperate to discover what he even wishes for in the first place. His search for meaning in a life that feels completely empty makes every scene with him quietly fascinating. Saber carries this unshakable sense of knightly honor and duty. She wants to save her kingdom and become the perfect king, even if it costs her own happiness. On the other side, you see the brutal lengths that some masters are willing to go to, even at the direct expense of their servants. Kenneth is a clear example. He treats Lancer more like a tool than a partner, and he doesn't hesitate to burn through the command seals when it suits his strategy. Lancer himself follows a strict code of chivalry and loyalty, yet he's forced to obey orders that go against everything he stands for. It creates this painful tension between knightly honor and cold pragmatism. Karya brings another layer entirely. He's barely in season 1, but his motivation feels deeply selfless. He's willing to endure constant pain and sacrifice everything just to pull Sakura out of the Mato family's cruelty. It makes you root for him even though his chances kind of look slim. Kiritsugu's ideal is just as intense. He's a mage killer who believes the only path to a better world is through necessary evil and sacrifice. He's willing to hurt the people closest to him if that's what it takes to reach his goal. Gilgamesh adds this arrogant, godlike perspective. He views the Grail as something that belongs to him by right, and his clashes with the others highlight how his King of Heroes mindset crashes against more human dreams. And what makes all of these ideals hit so hard is that none of them feel cheap or forced. They constantly clash in meaningful ways, and the story forces you to ask the question, if you were in the Holy Grail War, what would you fight for? And that constant pull in different directions is what makes the show feel so real to me. Now, even with all of that praise, I do have a few minor gripes. Though I'll admit, it's not really the show's fault. It's probably because my reading comprehension is through the floor, or maybe just because I don't speak Japanese, but I kept finding myself in a bit of a tough spot. The subtitles were flying by so fast that I had to rewind every 10 seconds just to keep up. And in my desperate attempt to actually understand what was happening so I could make this video for you guys, I have to admit something kind of embarrassing and offer my sincerest apologies for committing a grave sin. I had to switch to the English dub, and honestly, it turned out to be a pretty amusing experience. The voice acting isn't turbo cheeks, so, I'll give credit where credit's due, but while I was watching, I actually noticed a few bad translations. Crunchyroll's auto-generated captions can be a little bit wonky sometimes. Every once in a while, I stumbled across some absolute gold nuggets that actually had me laughing out loud. But sorry for the quick tangent, back to the show. Another thing that really stands out is how incredible the fight scenes and animations are in Fate Zero. They're genuinely top tier. Ufotable is operating on a completely different level as an animation studio. Now, I've always been critical of CGI in anime. Most of the time it looks stiff or cheap or just plain distracting, but Ufotable has this almost magical way of blending CGI into the fights so smoothly that you sometimes barely even notice that it's there. And instead of pulling you out for a moment, it actually elevates everything and helps create some of the most intense and visually stunning fight scenes you'll find in any anime. The way they use it during the servant battles makes the action feel massive and grounded at the same time. You get these huge, larger-than-life clashes without ever losing that raw, emotional weight. It's honestly impressive how well they pull it off. Take the first clash between Saber and Lancer. What starts as a tense, honorable, one-on-one duel quickly escalates into absolute chaos when the other servants start jumping in. The animation captures every sword swing, spear thrust, and burst of magical energy with such crisp detail that you feel the weight and speed of every move. It's the perfect example of how Ufotable turns a simple fight into something epic without losing the emotional stakes. Oh my gosh, and then there was the reveal of Iskander's noble phantasm, and when that massive army starts pouring out across the battlefield, the scale suddenly becomes overwhelming. The way that they mix traditional animation with CGI makes the sheer size of his forces feel real and terrifying, while still keeping the scene dynamic and easy to follow. You're not just watching a big attack, you're watching a king's dream literally come to life on screen. The result is this action that feels massive and grounded at the same time. Another layer that makes Fate Zero so strong is that this show isn't just about power scaling or who has the biggest noble phantasm. At its core, it's really about how you use the power that you have and the complex bonds between the masters and the servants. Assassin is honestly outclassed when you stack him up against someone like Gilgamesh or Iskander. On raw strength alone, he's nowhere near their level, but the way Kirei utilizes him is genuinely impressive. Instead of treating him as one of the frontliners, Kirei uses Assassin's stealth and presence concealment to gather information, manipulate the battlefield, and quietly push towards his own goals. It shows that clever strategy can sometimes matter more than raw power. And the same idea runs through the whole cast. The story feels real because it's not just about magic and muscles. It's about outsmarting your enemy and playing to your strengths. A perfect example is how Kiritsugu and Irisveal set up the deception that Irisveal is Saber's true master. While everyone else focuses on her, Kiritsugu is pulling the strings from the shadows the entire time. That kind of misdirection adds so much tension and makes the twists land even harder. Each master and servant pair brings their own distinct approach to winning the war. Some rely on overwhelming force, others on deception, alliances, or sheer willpower. Every strategy feels well thought out. The story delivers some genuinely surprising turns that keeps you guessing. Another thing that I really appreciated about Fate Zero was the actual powers and the power system. Of course, there are some all-time classics out there. You've got Nen from Hunter x Hunter, you got Stans in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and you got Haki and Devil Fruits in One Piece. Now those systems are fantastic in their own right, but the Fate series, I have to be honest, it really holds its own when it comes to those compelling ideas. You've got traditional magecraft and complex magic circuits, the creation of artificial humans like the Ainsburns homunculi, the ancient artifacts that carry centuries of history, and then the noble phantasms themselves, these legendary weapons and abilities that let servants unleash their full heroic potential. On top of that, you have the servant classes that define their roles and fighting styles, all mixed in with good old-fashioned swordplay and raw combat skill. What makes it click is how everything feels layered and purposeful. It's not just flashy powers for the sake of spectacle. The magic has rules and costs, and the noble phantasms feel like the true extension of each hero's legend, and that balance keeps the battles intellectually engaging as well as visually exciting. Overall, Fate Zero has a lot to offer, from its incredibly strong ideals to its compelling characters to the way that it actually makes you question who you're actually rooting for in the show. And like I said, the show keeps pulling you in every direction. The complex master-servant bonds, the clever strategies that value brains over brute force, and the fascinating power systems built around magic, artifacts, and noble phantasms and servant classes all come together to create something special. The animation and fight scenes are top tier, with Ufotable at the helm. The battles feel massive and grounded. Now, of course, like I said, I do have a couple of minor gripes, but that really doesn't take away from the show itself. After rewatching season 1 multiple times just so I can put everything together, I can confidently say that season 1 of Fate Zero is a solid 9 out of 10. If you're into thoughtful storytelling, intense action, and characters with real depth, Fate Zero is definitely worth your time. That's everything that I have for you guys today, so don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. You still here?